Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 276 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to cover the hot topic of how to not take things so personally, which is a common issue for thoughtful leaders. So let's get into it right now. Now, over the years, I've found that some thoughtful leaders have a tendency to take things personally. That is, they consider failures or issues as a personal problem, like a deficiency in their personality or skills that they then take ownership of. Now, of course, it's good to take accountability for our own issues and limitations, but when we take things personally, we can go too far and start to own more of the situation than is actually justified. So let's look at what happens when we take things personally. Well, we might do things like we consider feedback or issues as shortcomings in who we are as a person. Rather than seeing this as a critique on our skills or capabilities, we see it as an assault on our very being. Now, the impact, in my experience, is that our emotions tend to feel much more intense. We might feel shame, fear, insecurity, inadequacy, or even like we're an imposter, someone who shouldn't be in our situation because we're not capable. Now, this intense attachment to feedback or criticism can cause challenges in our leadership, such as things like avoiding feedback. We don't want to hear what people think because we think it will hurt us, and therefore we don't really want to ask about it. Another thing that can cause a challenge is this insecurity. When we feel like we're under attack, we can become fearful of situations where we feel vulnerable. And once again, this can lead to avoidance, even when we could benefit from being exposed to such situations. Another issue here is limited learning. Now, if we spend our time consumed about feeling bad, we're less likely to learn from experiences, and we might instead start to focus on damage control in an effort to feel better, rather than actually seeing the lessons that are coming from our experiences. Now, ideally, when faced with an issue or challenging feedback, we need to create some separation between the issue and our personal identity, or what's called self-concept. Instead of taking these things as a personal attack, it would be good to acknowledge that we have room for improvement and that we're not really such a bad person after all. Now, we do this by acknowledging that the skills we have and the actions we take are separate from our core identity, and this is where learning can happen. And there's a related post I would recommend you check out about how to accept feedback in a useful way. You can check that out on the link in the show notes page, which is thoughtfulleader.com/276. So why do thoughtful leaders take things personally? Well, not all thoughtful leaders have this problem, but I think many are susceptible to it. Now, why is this? Well, one reason I think is because, in general, thoughtful leaders are quite introspective. They spend time thinking about their own thoughts and feelings and their interactions with the people around them. The drawback to this is that it's all going on inside their own heads. When we're inside our head, it's hard to be objective. After all, we're only hearing one side of the story, and that's from our own inner voice. Now, if the inner voice isn't a positive voice, it'll wear us down over time and we'll start to feel bad about ourselves. Another reason is that our organizations are dominated by the stronger, louder, more extroverted personalities. Now, this can have thoughtful leaders struggling with confidence because they feel inadequate, like they should be the stereotypical strong leader. Now, when you're feeling low in confidence, it's easier to agree with negative comments about yourself because it confirms what you are already feeling, and you're looking for that evidence that you're not a good person or not a good leader. There's a related post I'd recommend here as well about being low in confidence and why that can be a good thing. That'll be in the show notes page as well. So now, how do we stop taking things personally? And this is the bit where we get to the part where it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? Now, we know that when someone tells us not to take things personally, it's not really helpful, is it? So we'll skip that bit. I'm not going to tell you to not take things personally. Instead, here are some other ideas to try to help you disconnect what you're experiencing from your sense of self. So, firstly, I want you to examine the context. A useful starting point is to consider the context surrounding the issue that you're having. For example, this could be the people involved, including their attitude and behavior, any factors that helped during the situation, and any factors that made the situation worse. You can list them all out, maybe get a notepad. Now, these aren't excuses, but they are simply a catalogue of the complexities of the situation. Now, once they're all out on paper, writing them out physically can help with this, you can stand back and see them all. There's lots of stuff, isn't there? And the bonus question I want you to answer about each of these things, and you can tick them off. How many of them are actually about you, and how many are actually about the situation? So the next thing I want you to do is to take the lessons. It would be irresponsible to suggest that you had no influence in the issue or the situation that happened. We need to take accountability for our part in the situation, but that doesn't mean heaping blame on yourself or taking it as a personal attack. Now, when something goes wrong, we need to learn from it and where we can. And to do this, I like to ask things like, what would I do differently if a similar situation happened again? Now, sometimes you'll think of things you could have done that might have helped, and other times you'll feel as if you actually did a reasonable job in the situation. If you do think of things you could have done better, it's important to recognize that this is all using the benefit of hindsight. It's easy to see things once they've already happened, but in the moment it can be quite different. The next thing I want you to do is consider the motive. Now, often when we take things personally, another individual is involved. They might give us feedback, criticize us, or behave in a way that makes us feel bad. Now, I think it's useful to consider the motive of the person involved. Did they mean to make this a personal attack? Or were they motivated in some other way? Perhaps stress was involved, or maybe even fear. Once again, it's worth considering our old friend, the iceberg model of human behavior. And when you stop to consider all the possible factors that could be going on beneath the waterline for the other person involved, it becomes clear that most of them are not about you. You can learn more about the iceberg model of human behavior in episode 209 as well, if you haven't already. Now, if most of the influences that are driving other people's behavior are not about you, then it doesn't really make sense to take things personally, does it? And even if the other person was being malicious, that's no greater reason to feel bad about yourself. That's on them. Now, before I continue with the last two steps, one of the courses that I provide that could actually be really helpful for you might be my Leadership Confidence online course. It's a great course that has 3 different stages, and it helps you with some tools and techniques to think about your thinking patterns, look at ways to safely move out of your comfort zone, and many, many more things as well. So as a Thoughtful Leader subscriber, you can get 50% off this course, and it's a self-paced course which you can take in your own time. To get that 50% discount, you just have to check out with the code confidence-50. Confidence-50. I'll also put a link to the course on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/276, so you can check it out. But this might be a really helpful one if you want to start to build the foundations of confidence in your leadership. Okay, the next step that is very useful here is to question the expectations. So we've looked at the context, we've taken some lessons and considered the motives of the other person. So now it's time to question the expectations. When we take things personally, we often have certain expectations in our heads, and these expectations often take the form of thoughts like, I should have known that, or I should have done better. Now, where do these shoulds come from? Yourself or someone else? Are they real, or are they sitting inside your own head? When you are the source of the expectations, you can always change them. And the last step in trying to take things less personally is to be a fly on the wall. There's a couple of approaches I suggest for this. And what we're trying to do here is get out of your own head for a little while. And the first way you can do this is to describe the situation that happened as if you were a fly on the wall. So if you were a fly observing the situation, how would you describe it? So write down what happened, and instead of writing the word I for yourself, use your first name instead. After all, a fly would never say I because they're watching you. They'd refer to you using your first name. Now, this technique is called psychological distancing, and it can help you see the situation from a more objective standpoint. And this can help to reduce the emotional response that you feel when recalling what happened. So the first one was describe the situation as if you were a fly on the wall. So for me, I would say, well, Ben got upset and raised his voice at the team member instead of saying I got upset and I raised my voice. So you can see the difference there. The next thing I'd suggest is pretend that this situation happened to someone else who you know and respect. Now, what advice would you give them? In most cases, I find that most of us would not say to this respected person, you're an idiot and you should have done better. No, you're usually much more forgiving and realistic when you're thinking about someone else. So thinking about giving advice to someone else can be a great way to generate good advice for yourself for next time. And there's a related post I'd recommend you check out called 3 Ways to Reduce Unhelpful Thinking. It's especially a good one for thoughtful leaders who ruminate and think a lot about and maybe have negative self-talk going on. So check that one out as well. So just to wrap up this episode, you have a choice whether to take things personally or not to. It's up to you whether you take them personally. If you've been doing it for a long time, it can be a tough habit to break out of. And we don't want to ignore opportunities for growth, but we also don't want to heap scorn and blame on ourselves. Neither ways are a good path forward. So it's your choice, and hopefully some of the ideas and the steps in this episode have managed to help with this. Now, I'm interested in your comments on this. Do you tend to take things personally? How do you deal with it? Let me and all the other thoughtful leaders know in the comments on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/276. And don't forget, you can get the Leadership Confidence online course for 50% off by using the coupon code confidence-50. And I'll put a link directly to that course in the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/276 as well. Alrighty, thank you very much for listening to this episode. As usual, if you have a minute to spare, could you please leave a positive review on your podcast app of choice, if you like the episode, of course, and helps me get the word out about Thoughtful Leader. Thank you, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next time.